Back for another Tuesday. This is Nuance at Scala, and this is where we have great discussions on what's happening locally and bring on some exceptional guests. And this week is no different. We've got our co-host with us, though, Jay Carter. How you doing, Jay?
Doing all right. Still in that allergy season, but doing okay. How about yourself?
Did you get your laptop fixed?
Yes, I did. I was actually surprised. My battery was swelling and it was crazy. And I had to take it into the Apple store, but they had it back to me. I had it within like 2 days. It was mailed off and back to me in my hands. So I was real surprised at how quick they did it.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Jay is out there in Japan, and he's the chair of BLM Tokyo. He's also known as Timid in the hip hop world. So juggling a few different things. But I'm glad you're back in commission.
Yeah, back in action, putting in work and making this computer work harder than it should. So
there you go. And our very special guest this week, we have Paul Nichols, a good friend of mine who ran for governor in his past primary in New York. So we'll talk about that and everything he's up to. How you doing, Paul?
Great to see you again, Mike, and great to be here with Jay. I didn't know you realized Jay was in Japan, so shout out to that, man. Really, really cool. If you were over here in New York, that heat wave that we have coming up this week would burn out those allergies. So we got you here. It's great to be on.
Japan is no slouch when it comes to temperature. It's pretty humid summers. I lived in Tallahassee, Florida for a number of years, and none of these places can play with Tallahassee, Florida. So yeah, I'm all right.
You're ready for it, Jay. Real nice, man. So you're the one sending all this heat to New York. I was wondering where it's coming from. It's you, Jay. We found it. Found the culprit.
Yeah, I'm good. I remember living in New York. New York had some summers, but I mean now, of course the heat wave it's kicked up a notch. But I was still okay. Nice.
Now it's great to be here with you, Jay. Great to be with you, Mike. Man, again, me and Mike, we go back, and so I'm really grateful to be here with you. Amazing audience, and I took a look at some of the podcast stuff that you guys have been doing. CNN, they better watch out. Anderson Cooper and those folks, they better watch out, man. You're coming for them, Mike. This is really great stuff and really great content, man.
Thank you. And
hey, give him a call. Give him a call. We would love to do a show there. Give him a call.
I was going to say, around these parts, CNN can mean two different things because we've got the hip hop connection as well. So I don't know if we're talking CNN or Capone Noriega.
Right, that's right. That's right.
Hey, give them a call. We can get on the next album. So let's do that too.
Right, we'll take both of them.
Yeah, no problem.
Queens.
Definitely.
So we like to come up with something on the light side. I think you mentioned Netflix is up to its old tricks again.
Yeah, man. So Netflix just recently announced earnings and some other news. And so there been a long rumored ad-supported tier that they were going to come out with. And now they've confirmed it. Either it's going to drop at the end of this year or it's going to be sometime in 2023. But they're not looking to put ads in the standard Netflix format. They're going to open up a tier for people who don't mind ads and are willing to pay a little bit less on their subscription service and would have ads. Now, I don't know what that means as far as movies. Hopefully it doesn't mean in the middle of your movie there's going to be an ad pop up. I'm hoping it's just going to be in between the movies when you go to watch the next one, or in between episodes of something, a TV show. Maybe they'll put them in between the episodes themselves. I haven't seen any confirmation on that, but what are you thinking about that? Would you go for the ad-supported tier on Netflix? I mean, that's how Hulu operates.
I don't like it. I think part of the benefit of watching something on Netflix is not having that. Like, I can watch a series now and just go straight through and you don't deal with the commercials or ads, right? That's the benefit of paying for it. I mean, it reminds me of HBO, not HBO Max or streaming, just regular HBO. Like, the model was you were paying a premium price for it, but you don't have to deal with the commercials.
Right.
That's what we're expecting on a service like this.
But that's not going away. So that service won't change. You can still have that, your regular, what you're paying for. You won't have ads on anything. It's just for people who may not want to pay that $9.99 a month or whatever it is, and are willing to watch ads, they'll pay something cheaper. I don't know, whatever they haven't given a price point, but
It's not
say
free, right? It's not free with ads. There's still
no.
yes.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, maybe $6.99 or $3.99. Who, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't like
Probably
that.
comparable to Hulu.
If I'm not mistaken, Peacock does something similar, but I don't like that model. I think if you're paying for it, you should get the content, not the ads.
Right. So, well, Netflix has been kind of hurting these past few years. I mean, they're still the biggest, but there was really no competition for a long time. And then now everybody's got a streaming service, and then not only that, with Disney bringing out their streaming service, they're of course going to pull their content from Netflix, and that's all the Marvel movies, the Star Wars movies. They bought Fox Studios, so that's all the Fox stuff. Amazon has their streaming service, and they bought MGM last year, so they're going to pull all MGM movies. And so Netflix is, going to be left with a smaller pool, and so they're losing revenue. They lost about 200,000 subscribers this past year or something like that.
And
so
I saw someone say, well, with all these streaming services out there now, there should be a service where you can just pay a monthly fee and then get a bunch of them in a bundle. And somebody responded, that's cable. Now you're going back to cable all over again.
Exactly. So it's crazy. Paul, would you go for the ad supported tier?
Look, all that's going to do is have my binging from 3 o'clock in the morning with those extra ads, send it up to now like 5 o'clock in the morning. So, I'd have to probably try to pass on that one. I'd play a little bit more so that if in the middle of my binging on Stranger Things, it's not going to add an extra half an hour to that, to into series programming. But I get it where, there are a lot of folks that, they're feeling the price point when you're talking about the everyday average person that, once upon a time, $9 a month or $10 a month wasn't a big deal. When you have like 10 of those piling up, if you'll save a little bit here, a little bit there, it becomes a little bit of an appeal. So, it's a kind of like a win-win for the advertisers that are trying to get their content in front of folks and their products in front of folks and the services in front of folks. And it does allow for Netflix to draw in some new folks that, again, that $10 price point may be a little bit too high for them. And in some instances, it may be even going a little bit higher. So I get it. For me personally, it's just gonna kill my binging thing all the way over. I always say one more episode, and then like 5 episodes later, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I have to be up at 6 o'clock that day. So there it is.
Yeah. Hey.
With YouTube TV, I was looking into that at one point, but was very expensive. It didn't make sense. It was like having cable again. I mean, I thought the purpose was to try to save money by cutting the cord and going streaming and all that stuff. But if you're paying like $50 a month to get some basic channels, plus let's say you have Netflix and something else, well, now you have an expensive cable plan.
That's right. It's a cable bill all over again. Absolutely. And then the same thing is with YouTube. I mean, you get it for free, but you have the ads, which again, as much as they can make it as less intrusive as possible, could still allow for you to have maximum enjoyment. But sometimes they come in right at that climax, and it's like, oh man, I was really enjoying that, and then I'm hearing about the paper towel that I need to pick up there. So.
Yeah, and those YouTube ads are getting more and more intrusive. Like, now on mobile, it's like 2 ads before you get to the video. Yeah, and there's a multiple in the video. It's going to force. I think it's going to force some people to start using more ad blockers and things like that.
Right. And
you don't want to get. I was going to say, you don't want to get in and kind of destroy the user experience.
Right.
At the same while you're getting your revenue. So it's kind of crazy.
I was just watching something we were talking about music before, the algorithms now and how all this stuff plays out, how I think it was DJ Premier actually saying that they purposely make songs to be a lot shorter now because they want to avoid the skips, right? And I think the algorithm rewards you if more listeners play the whole song, or let's say 75% of the song versus just the first half or less. So they want to make the songs as short as possible so that people can get through them quicker and not skip them.
Right.
That's crazy. It's like, everything that we're doing, all of the media that we're consuming is really being dictated by the algorithm and just, how it's presented to us. It's affecting what we take in as well, because it plays a role in what's being created now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what they have too is like some of these advertisers, depending on how much they pay, like you can't even skip over the ad. So it's like you're stuck in there for like that 15, 30 seconds. And I find myself searching for that skip and I'm locked in. I can't go anywhere. Then you end up seeing the whole thing. And so, to the extent that, there is a balance between, them still having to meet their revenue quotas and then trying to entice other new subscribers coming in. You don't want to kill that user experience. And for a majority of the folks that, now getting their music off of YouTube, that's now the thing. I have some folks. I don't know if I should even be saying this. I don't know if it's legal or not. But a lot of folks are downloading all this stuff from YouTube to MP3, and then they're just loading up their devices with music from YouTube. And I know YouTube is aware that this stuff is happening, and they're trying to at least make sure that they can, still recover and then, be able to still have those revenue streams coming in. Netflix can read the writing on the wall as well. If you don't stay ahead of the curve, you end up like Blockbuster Video, where, some of your audience may be a little bit on the younger side, like what's Blockbuster Video? Once upon a time, people had to go to like a brick and mortar store to rent movies and stuff like that, but they didn't stay ahead of the curve. And so I remember when Netflix was just a mail-in CD service where you ordered the CD or the DVD of the movie that you wanted, you got it, and then you can mail it back with no late fee, so you could have it for like a month. Blockbuster, if you had it late for like 10 minutes, they were charging you all kind of extra money. So they never stayed ahead of the curve. So I think this is, Netflix's way of trying to stay ahead of the curve, trying to stay relevant, as you have so many other, as Jay was saying, so many other streaming services, trying to take a bite out of their big pie.
Sure.
Right.
YouTube not only is aware that that's happening, they thrive off of it, right? That's where they generate their revenue. It's from, if you want to call it illegal or pirated material, copyrighted material. It really shouldn't be on there, but that's where they get the most of their traffic from. And there's a whole court case over it. I think it might have been a Star Wars movie or some big movie, right, that was uploaded to YouTube. And the movie studio said, hey, YouTube is well aware that this is happening. They're making money off of this. They're doing nothing to stop it. And a whole legal framework was created where it was like, all right, YouTube might know that it's happening in the abstract, but in order for it to be actionable, it has to have evidence of a specific instance of it happening and not taking it down once it's brought to their attention. So
That's right.
like they look the other way until someone points it out and basically hangs it in front of their face and you better take this one down.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what prompted the whole content ID system. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that scans uploads algorithmically for copyrighted, audio or whatever, and either flags it or takes it down. And they've kind of some way dealt with that.
As a hip hop enthusiast, I like that better because hip hop is always based on sampling, right? Taking music that was out there and making it better, making it our own. And instead of it just coming down automatically from being flagged, I like the idea of allowing it to stay up, but giving some of that revenue to the copyright owner.
That's right. Correct. Absolutely. And like you said, to them knowing that this was happening, I think it was the movie Morbius that came out where they deliberately like let it stay up there because it was so terrible in the theaters that they wanted folks to pirate it so that they could see it, which is, hey, look, if whatever you got to do to get it in front of folks.
And that's what happens a lot of times. Even now, the major labels will, you've got not only the music video, but you've got just the audio release that goes up on YouTube. And it's more about getting how many eyes can get on it versus how many sales it's going to happen. It's
right. Right.
Instead of selling the music, and it's more about getting that audience. Because once you got the audience, then you can sell anything to that
Right.
base.
But
That's
the quality is not the same, and maybe a bit of an audio file. But compare a WAV file, compare a CD for that matter to a YouTube stream. I mean, you can really discern the difference. It's not.
You can. I've never been able to hear that difference, but I know you've always been able to hear
magic
that.
ears, Mike. Mike's got the magic ears, man.
To me, it's a big difference. I'm not saying YouTube sounds bad. I'll listen to stuff off YouTube for convenience, but the quality of it doesn't compare at all to me.
Yeah, I've never been able to pick that difference. I think you are also one of those who could pick the difference between the regular CD quality type of MP3, which is like 128 kbps versus the 312. And you can just very clearly hear the difference.
Very clearly. Also, what's on the radio? Can you hear that? On the radio, it's usually very over compressed, and then they try to make it as loud as possible, but it almost gets distorted. So like CD quality versus radio quality is a big difference too.
Yeah. That's why I like trying to sit. That's why I like sending my stuff to you to mix, because I didn't have those ears.
Well, let's get into a serious topic, I guess. We spoke about this stuff. I like talking about this, but people want to hear something more serious. In fact, Jay, on that note, someone commented on YouTube, was on one of the shorts, one of the videos, that they didn't think the question that we put out was serious enough or important enough. I thought it was pretty important.
Right. It was about our most recent poll about whether or not basically we should have open primaries. Whether people that are not registered to a party should be able to vote in that party's primary. And one of the responses that we got on the channel was like, this is a stupid question. You're wasting people's time. So I just want to say, first of all, we bring up the questions because these are proposals that have been made. People are talking about these things, and it may sound like a silly question to some people, but there was actually things that's being talked about, and there's like 24 states that have some form of an open primary. So it's things that's actually happening right now. So well, after I put that response in, it seems like that person deleted their comment. So
right. Well, I'm curious as to why that person would think it was a stupid question. Is it because they think the answer is obvious? Is it because they think there are more important things that we should be focusing on? I mean, because I think that no matter what issue you think is important, that can speak to it, right? Because it affects who gets into office and how people get into office, who then make the policies that I'm sure you do care about. I mean, if you think that's a stupid one, well, what's not stupid? Whatever you think is not stupid, I'm sure is going to be affected by how we elect people in the first place, right?
Right. I think, and it, he didn't say why, what the reason behind it. I was hoping a response back from to say, oh, well, this is what I was thinking, but apparently not. But I mean, it's still on the surface. I can understand how someone might think it's a kind of a stupid question or a foregone conclusion, because ultimately, and we've had that discussion, that primaries are essentially elections for the party itself. It's not a public thing. It's for members of that party. And so for saying, oh, should they be open for people that aren't in the party? It kind of sounds like,
Oh, that's the way you're taking it. Okay. I actually don't disagree with that. And I kind of think along those same lines, but I assumed that the person saying it's stupid is saying that because they assume that you should be allowed to do it.
It could be. I don't know. They deleted it. We'll never know.
Yeah. And that just shows you the support on both sides of it. In fact, my poll, 50-50, and I was so annoyed because I was trying to get a decision one way or the other. It was like so close the whole way through. And I put up a post last night on Facebook and on Twitter saying my poll is tied. Someone break the tie. And it was broken. And then more people voted and it ended up at 50-50 again. And I guess that's just one of those things where it's kind of split down the middle. But what I find is that you have people from all sides of the political spectrum who support this. Like Sal Albanese was on last week, and he was saying that this is a way to make the system more moderate. But then you have people on the left who want independents who are not Democrats because they think that the Democratic Party is too conservative for them, and they want to be able to vote. Like the Bernie supporters want to be able to vote in the primary. So it's not really broken down by partisan lines here.
Right. What's your take on it, Paul?
Yeah, I'm interestingly enough, as a registered Democrat, I'm 100% for open primaries. Where I grew up in Southeast Queens, it's heavily democratically registered. And so I feel bad for my friends and family members who are registered in independent party, registered even as the evil Republicans. And again, I'm using that sarcastically because Republicans aren't evil. They are absolutely as vital to the system and vital to the thread of our democratic process that we need to, ensure that we have strengthened. So when election season comes around, and in a place like Southeast Queens, the election is essentially won in the primary. And so it's not fair to those individuals that would like to have a say in who represents them, who goes to Albany, who goes to Washington, to be able to say, well, you know what, I want a representative that reflects my values. So where I do hear the arguments of sabotage of the Democratic Party, watering down of the Democratic Party, it's an issue of basic fairness. And so, to be able to follow the lead of other states that recognize the fairness of bringing in more voices to make sure that representatives adequately reflect not just that party, but that district. And that's what it's about. It shouldn't be, we have to get to the place where we recognize the reality of what we're doing when we have districts that are heavily Democratic. Again, in Southeast Queens, it's like 10-1, 1,000-1 registered Democrats to Republicans, where a Republican doesn't stand a chance in November. So you should essentially give them a voice in June when those primaries are. Let them be able to have a voice, because that representative is speaking for everyone in that district and not just the democratically registered and enrolled members. So it's a little controversial as a Democrat, but I'm not your average run-of-the-mill Democrat.
Well, you make a compelling
Isn't that
case.
what the general election is for?
Yeah, well, the general election is for that if you actually have a competitive general election. In Southeast Queens, you don't even see Republicans on the line. The Democrats largely go unopposed. They have no Republican running against them. And when you understand the reality of the dynamics of any given district, you can either say, well, we're for the party being entirely empowered, or we're for the people being empowered, and feel choices are empowering people. And so that's, it's recognized in reality. If we had purple districts that are more fair and more balanced, by all means, we can close the primaries and have the parties duke it out amongst themselves. And then we all go to November like we do in presidential elections and statewide elections to do that.
I've got some questions now, because I think you do make a compelling case for your position, but you keep mentioning fairness. And I agree we should try to make the system more fair. But number one, who told people to register as something other than Democrat? I mean, no one made them register to a different party. So if we're talking about fairness, my second question, which is really related, is why are we punishing Democrats, or why are we changing the system in an area where Democrats are doing better? You're saying if it's a more balanced district, then don't do it, but do it in a district where Democrats win. Is that fair to say that we're going to handicap the system essentially because Democrats have such an advantage in an area? And conversely, there are districts in around the country where Republicans have a huge advantage. And New York State even has no exception to that. So if a Republican is doing very well because it's a very Republican area, should we handicap the system against them by letting Democrats vote in their primary?
Yeah, and that's a great response. The beautiful thing is that when you open up their primaries, it goes both ways. So it wouldn't be just Democrats, in theory, handicapped. You can have Democrats tampering and playing around in Republicans, or independent elections. They could do the same thing. So you essentially open the system up so that way the fairness argument happens. Now, when you look at how open primaries have played out in other states, you really don't see this kind of, boogeyman that's out there, seeing all of this real election tampering and watering down of primary candidates. You really don't see that happening. So it ultimately ends up being a straw man argument to try to say, well, these worst case scenarios are happening. Well, in the states that allow it, you really don't see that happening. But what you do see happening is folks that, for whatever reason or another, because the dynamics of party platforms shift so quickly. One moment you have a Republican platform or a Democratic platform that perfectly aligns with who I, the individual voter, believe in. But then you may have someone that may completely disagree with an AOC or Bernie Sanders, and they swing the party way left. And wait, now all of a sudden I wake up, I'm a registered Democrat, but I don't really truly believe now in the platform that the Democratic Party is espousing for. So, you could now bounce and register as something else. And then when they come back, you can bounce back and register. So we could play that game, and that could be one way of addressing it. Or we could just say, we're going to recognize the reality that party platforms can change, that party leadership can change. And we understand the dynamics that should be a largely inter-party thing. But when the balances of fairness versus the balances of preserving party purity are all, leveled out, we could say it's about party purity over getting the best candidate or over best representation that speaks to all areas of the district. That's an absolute thing that we can outweigh. For me personally, as a Democrat, I'll sacrifice a little bit of my party purity so that even some of my independent brothers and sisters, my Republican brothers and sisters, who in some instances I strongly disagree with, they should still have a say in who will speak for them in terms of the very real issues of housing and very real issues of education, very real issues of healthcare, very real issues of crime, and how those play out in their individual districts, where money is going in those individual districts. You have Republicans and independents who have real organizations that get stiffed and shafted because it's a Democrat that's in there in office, and they're just going to completely ignore those Republican interests. I've seen it. Once upon a time, the Senate 14th Senatorial District included all of the Rockaway Peninsula, where you have a part of the peninsula that's heavily Republican, and you can easily have a Democrat that will ignore all of their Republican, all of the Republican side of that peninsula and just do things that ultimately represent Democratic interests. Do I think that's fair? Absolutely not. But the right thing to do is to open it up and say, yeah, which one is more important to us, party purity or being allowed to have regular people have a say in what their representative does for their districts?
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like you're getting rid of parties. I mean, you can still have parties as organizations, as clubs, if you will, but parties as we know them now would really cease to exist under a completely open system. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I mean, it does allow more people to access the political process in a way that they can't now. I mean, you can't really argue that, especially in an area like New York City, which is so polarized. And as I said before, other places are polarized in the other direction. So it's not just a one-way thing.
Right.
But this allows more people to access the process. I mean, that is definitely a benefit of it, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, there are, balances to be made here, pros and cons. We could debate it all day, but that is one of the benefits.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And one question that would linger there, and we kind of addressed it in the pre-talk, is how would that work for the people voting? Would they get more than one vote? Let's say they want to cast a vote in the Democratic primary, and they want to cast a vote in the Republican primary and in the independent primary. Does that work that way, or they just get to do only one, and they have to choose only one per primary?
Yeah, I would absolutely have it where you only get essentially one bite at the apple. And so you would pre-register with which party you're going to intend to vote for that upcoming primary. And you have to lock in and stick with that particular primary. So that way we still respect one of our fundamental principles of one person, one vote in the country. And so if you are in a heavily Republican district and you're registered Democrat, you just pre-register that I intend to vote in the Republican primary this year, and then you're foreclosed from voting in any other primary, and vice versa. If you're in a heavily Democratic enrolled district and you're registered as an independent or you're registered as a Republican, you'd have to make your intentions clear with the pre-registration process. There's different ways that it happens, but you just make your intention clear of which primary that you're going to vote in, and just, we'll get our one person, one vote principle going.
Sounds like it'll be a very complex process, but like I said, we don't know. It could be good thing. It could not. Who knows what's happening right now? Something has to open up to let people participate more, whether it's keeping the system we've got and tweaking that, or trying something new.
That's my concern, though, making things too convoluted, because it's hard enough to get people to vote as it is, and low turnout throughout the country. And even for myself, I consider myself a high information voter. I research all the candidates. I'm being really into this stuff. But do I know everyone's platform who's running for office is even available sometimes? So for me to go in and start getting into ranked choice voting now, I got to try to find up to 5 candidates. I might not know what 5 candidates on this ballot even stand for, or who they are. So that's tough, even for someone like me who's out in the community and probably knows a lot of these people running. Imagine someone who's not, who's just voting, they're just going to work, coming home, it's time to vote. They go to vote. How are they going to know who all these names are, what they stand for, and what does it mean to rank them? I mean, I had conversations with very intelligent people who didn't understand ranked choice voting last year, and they thought it was a system. It was like, the person you vote for number 1 gets 5 points. The person you vote for number 2 gets 4 points. And you add them all up that way. And that's not how it works. And that affects the way people vote also if they're confused with the system. So my concern generally is just disenfranchisement. When you make the system more and more complicated and convoluted, I think it could lead to people staying home, people getting frustrated, people not knowing how to vote properly, or people getting fed up with the results, because we're used to a system in America where, for better or worse, the person with the most votes wins. But now if you start playing all these different games and saying we're going to eliminate this one and re-sign their votes, and I do think it would be frustrating for me as a voter myself if the person I voted for got the most votes and lost the election. I would say
absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that, Mike, because I was actually at an event when ranked choice voting first was introduced, and it was an explainer event where the person explaining it didn't even understand ranked choice voting. So a couple of questions came up, and then after a while, they just kind of threw up their hands. Well, I don't really know either. So, that's entirely frustrating for folks that are just trying to learn the initial system, much less a much more complex system. But to the point, we're in the 21st century, and so when are our systems of voting and participation going to catch up with our technology? I mean, it's so simple. We're able to do our banking online. We're able to pay our bills online. We're able to do so many things that largely happen in a secure fashion. And we can easily devote the time and resources to be able to have folks vote online, bring the system to the people, have the system go where the people are. So if it's, taking the time to create, a digital infrastructure that's safe and secure and will allow people to vote from their homes, again, we can have a system that we have ID systems, we have, verification systems that we do, again, with our own personal stuff. So that way we verify our identity with different things. We should be able to expand our system, bring it into the 21st century. Folks should be able to vote from home. Folks should be able to have a ballot that's a secure online ballot that puts a little blurb of what people stand for next to them. They can scroll over, highlight on the name. It has a drop down with, 1 or 2 points, because I spoke to folks that, went to the most recent primary with judges, and they had no clue who they was. And if I'll be honest, some of the folks, I didn't even know who they were. And so, why not have an electronic system where you hover over the name and then like a couple of points of what they stand for drops down? But that's my call coming into the 21st century. How dare I say our system of government and our system of participation come into the 21st century. We should spend all of our money on so many other things, but we should be in the 21st century already.
Well said. And it sounds like you're in campaign mode. So I want to segue into your campaign. And I think here's a good segue to get us to that topic. When I was serving as counsel and legislative director in the state Senate, I received a lot of phone calls leading up to the 2016 presidential primary. And these were Bernie Sanders supporters calling, asking for Governor Cuomo at the time to call for an emergency session of the legislature over the weekend to change New York's laws to allow an open primary so that these independent Bernie supporters could vote for him for president. And I said to all of them, with all due respect, the senator that I represent is a Bernie Sanders delegate. He agrees with you, but there's no way in hell that Governor Cuomo is going to call an emergency session of the legislature over the weekend to change the law to allow people to vote for Bernie Sanders. It's not going to happen.
Right, absolutely.
I think this maybe speaks to the cynicism that a lot of us feel when it comes to the people that are kind of in charge or in power and the way they try to hold people back, sometimes fairly, sometimes not fairly. But I think you experienced some of that yourself, maybe inadvertently by the powers that be, but you felt it in your campaign, right?
Yeah, some of it was very advertent. Back in May of last year, actually, while Governor Cuomo was still in office, I, without any political motivation, announced that I was running for governor of the state of New York. Again, the governor was still at the height of his powers when I was having my initial discussions about running. And so it wasn't about political opportunism, as some folks that kind of jumped in the race a little bit later had. This was about standing for something that was right, knowing that this was at the point in which I was considering a very historic candidate back in January of 2021. No one would have thought that, we'd have a governor who was at historic highs in approval rating coming from his handling of COVID-19 in 2020, disgracefully leaving office in August of last year. But, it wasn't about any of that. I stood up on the steps of Queensborough Hall, and we said, we're trying to bring a new voice in politics. We're trying to bring a new perspective in politics. I'm not saying that there was anything terrible about what the governor was doing at the time. I actually think he was a very, very strong governor. He did a lot of really good things. Did I agree with everything that he did? Absolutely not. But there was a focus that I believe that needed to be placed on the middle class, on regular, ordinary, average New Yorkers that I don't think was happening. Or at the very least, a strong campaign would get the governor at the time to be able to consider things. So fast forward a little bit later, where the governor Cuomo had to leave office, and then Governor Hochul ascended to the office, there was a very strong fix to have her be the nominee. And we heard it play out in the papers with the chair of the party, Jay Jacobs, and I'll call him out. He basically told everyone to stand down. We don't want anyone running against her. We want her to be the nominee. And that alone by itself is anti-democratic. We want more voices to present before the people in closed or open primaries to give them an opportunity to choose between different policy positions, different platforms. Let them be able to say what stance or which person best represents what my needs would be as a regular New Yorker. And so the first place that we saw a little bit of that fix, Mike, was at the Democratic convention that took place in February. So just a little brief story. The candidates were initially denied an opportunity to speak, but there were a number of state committee persons that said, no, that's anti-democratic. We have candidates for governor. They should be allowed to present in the convention and speak. So at the 11th hour, the chairperson kind of came up with these different qualifications to be able to get the candidates to speak. Namely, they had to get 15 of the state committee members to sign a petition to recognize you as official candidate and be able to speak. We were informed on the day that it was due at 4:45 that this is due at 5 o'clock on purpose, because the chairperson and their team didn't think that our candidacy could do it. Lo and behold, we actually did do it. We got the right amount of committee persons. We submitted it on time. And lo and behold, the time came for us to address the committee. The other candidates, one of which, Tom Swazi, didn't actually submit what he was supposed to do on time. He was given an opportunity to speak. Jumaane Williams was given an opportunity to speak. My candidacy was denied that opportunity to speak. having submitted what we were required to submit to be able to speak. And that was done intentionally because at that point, we were growing in the polls. We were polling at 5%, 6%. One of the Emerson College polls came out, had us at 5. A couple of other polls had us at 6. And Mike, this is coming from where only my mother in the state knew who I was. And so we were growing very, very fast in the polls. Again, 5% in the Emerson poll. The congressman who was a whole Nassau County executive for a number of years and a sitting congressman with $5 million in the bank, we were less than 2 percentage points away from him. And the sitting public advocate, he was actually at 9% in that particular poll. We were 4 percentage points away from him. Unheard of coming from where we were, but we were building some strong momentum. And this is back in February, mid-February.
Paul, I have to ask real quick.
Yeah.
What made you decide to start by running for governor? I mean, people will say, like you said, you're not known throughout the state. Most people would suggest starting for a smaller office or something like that. What made you think I'm going to start by running for governor out the gate?
Yeah, this was to break down a narrative, Mike, because I've answered that question like a million times. And one of the things that I mentioned right away, if you have a billionaire CEO that comes and says, I want to run for president of the United States, or I want to run for mayor of the city of New York, or I want to run for governor of the state of New York, no one really kind of questions them. They're just a millionaire, billionaire. So, all right, go right ahead. Run for the highest office, having no experience in government, having no experience in how the legislature works, having no knowledge of the inner workings of government, but sure, go for the highest office. No one really kind of questions that. We kind of go with it. And a lot of times they end up winning the office. See Mike Bloomberg for the mayor of the city of New York, see Donald Trump for the highest office in the entire country, and then see many, many other examples throughout. But when a regular person that interestingly enough, has very, strong, in-depth inner knowledge of the legislature, of government and how it works, and has worked in Congress, has worked in the judiciary, has worked in the state legislature in Albany for almost 2 decades. The first question is, well, you're a regular guy. You can't do that. But mind you, we have probably more experience than some of the ones that have no experience in government, but they're just a rich person. And so it's a narrative that we've placed qualifications on our leaders that have ultimately shaped the path of these leaders. So what happens is we elect the 1%. They don't necessarily have a sense of urgency to fix the problems of the regular folks because they don't ultimately, have to deal with those things. So there's no urgency of getting crime wiped because they don't live in the high crime areas. I live 5 minutes away from one of the highest crime areas in the city. There's no sense of urgency of getting the educational system right because they're not sending their kids to those schools. And so, the list goes on and on. So we were breaking down this narrative of these are the check marks that people have to have in order to go for the most powerful positions that really drive the conversation, because regular people have the same skill sets, have the same judgment, have the same ability to speak for their communities as wealthy people who no one really ever asks those questions to.
I agree with you on that, but I think the reason why people look at the wealthy person as more viable is because they know the amount of money it takes to compete at that level. So there's a few ways typically you can reach that level. One is working your way up to government and kind of over the course of many years, building that campaign infrastructure, building that donor base, getting your name out there enough to be able to do it. Or you can kind of take a shortcut, if you want to call that politically, and just have a lot of money and basically self-finance a campaign. But either way, it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of organizational support. You could buy it or you can earn it, for lack of a better term. But if you don't have either of those, people look at you because based on how the system is, as someone who doesn't have a good shot at winning at that level.
Right. And interestingly enough, Mike, that you say that, oddly enough, the inner folks look at money as a point of viability, but when it comes to the broader general public, they look at the fact that a candidate has money as a qualification, like a hidden qualification. Well, you were successful in business, so that will translate your business successfulness will translate to success as an executive in the government realm, which
All right, that's a fallacy. That's a
yeah,
fallacy.
that's an absolute
That's a complete
fallacy.
fallacy.
That's an absolute fallacy. And so no one really questions the qualifications of this business person, where in business, it's all about the bottom line. There's really
Right.
no inclusion of the people aspect of it. So as long as, you know, the books are on the up and up, they're doing their job. But
Right.
it's not factoring in that people are going homeless. It's not factoring in that educational systems are not fair when you move from one zip code to the next zip code. And so the money argument ultimately ends up being as a qualifying factor. Well, this is a good qualification because we know that they have been successful, not counting the fact that regular people who have been successful with managing budgets on their own, whether it comes to, you know, their own personal situations or it comes to displaying very, very good judgment. You know, this was an argument that they made back in 2008 when then Senator Barack Obama was running. Well, you're inexperienced, you're not really qualified. And he made the argument that it's about judgment. It's about being able to show that you have the temperament to lead, that you have the ability to identify and connect with the voters to be able to know what their needs are. So that was it. And you've had less funded campaigns in the past that can still have that infrastructure and still grow, which we actually did pretty well. But some of the little things that the party did, most of which, you know, were breaking the law, you know, ended up derailing us.
I want to talk about that. So your petitions, right? You mailed them in to the Board of Elections. They arrived on the last day and should have been okay, but they denied you the ballot anyway, based on something that they did, right? They instructed the post office to put the mail in a mail truck, and then it got there late. By the time they went to the post office, and your petition was already on the mail truck, but they were based on their own instruction, right?
Right. So what happened is you're exactly right. First, you know, they didn't, no one thought that, you know, the 15,000, you know, marker of what you need to actually get on a statewide ballot. No one thought that we could do it. You know, we had gotten realistically over 25,000 signatures, more than, you know, most of the other candidates in both parties that ran, more than Rob Astorino that ran on the Republican side and some of the other Republicans. And we were right in pace with a number of the other Democrats. We had Tom Swazing, we had Jumaane Williams, who we were right there in pace. They just had slightly more than us. And we had nowhere near the amount of funds they had, but we had a lot of energy from people all throughout the state. So what happened was there was a lot of press that Andrew Cuomo could possibly be submitting petitions for getting ballot access. Again, having the party already voted Governor Hochul as their presumptive nominee, he would need the 15,000 like everyone else. So what happened was, and this came directly from the post office, the Board of Elections specifically told the post office, do not send our mail to the office, specifically during the week when petitions are due, knowing that the rule is that they're only counted as received when they get them in the office. So they deliberately said that the rule is when we get them, they're counted, but they changed it to have the post office say, well, we don't want to get it here, which they don't do that. That they literally did that because the news article in the Post said that Andrew Cuomo may be submitting his petitions by mail because he didn't show up on the Thursday. So they deliberately pointed the mail away from the Board of Election, specifically trying to block Andrew Cuomo, because all they could do is say that, oh, well, it never got here. But y'all directed the mail away from getting to the Board of Elections in the first place. So ours, where we had the receipts, we had everything that showed that the post office got it to the place it was supposed to on time. We spoke to a representative from the Board of Elections, and they acknowledged that it was there, that they saw it, that they were going to go get it. And and they said they were going to call us back. We called back a couple of times. They said, yeah, we're taking care of it. And then they never called us back, and they deliberately held it so that way it would arrive a day late. They did that obstructionist on purpose.
Wow. I think saying things like that we were speaking about people being frustrated with the political system and whatnot. Things like that reinforce that idea that, everything is messed up. Why should I even participate?
Right, right.
And, I think that also helps candidates like yourself who come in without that background of holding office and this and that, because then people are like, okay, being that every guy, so to speak, kind of, they can relate a little bit. It's like, okay, we're looking at how these politicians are playing these games. We don't like it. We don't have alternatives. You step in, you're like, I don't like it either. I want to do something about that. And so you can get some of that connection, I think, with them.
Absolutely. And that's why we saw the momentum just building. In that same convention where we weren't allowed to speak, we still got 2% of the vote, which was more than what the sitting congressman got, and just a few percentage points less than what Jumaane Williams got. Both of who got a chance to speak, but they were able to look at our candidacy and see, well, this is something different. This is something new. And it was drawing amazing attention all throughout the state. We had an amazingly huge town hall event out in Niagara, New York, again, which is not too far from Buffalo. Folks came out, people everywhere we were going were really gravitating towards this message and really holding on to it. We went to Sodus, New York, with my running mate, who was the mayor of that particular city. He switched registration parties to be able to register as a Democrat, because he's like, wow, I really believe in this message and really believe that, this is a time where we need a regular person to step up. But we had first-time people that were carrying petitions for us who had never participated in the system at all. One thing that the Board of Elections and some of the other parts of the Democratic machinery tried to do is, some of our petitioners submitted to change their party, and they tried to, hold it where their change of party was too late, even though they had receipts showing that they had submitted everything on time. These people were incredibly frustrated. Some folks collected thousands of signatures where they were excited that something new could possibly be on the way. But they did everything that they could and essentially shut our campaign down by the end of March, because we spent all of April and May, back and forth in the courts. We joined forces with one of the other folks that had been fighting even some of the redistricting lines. We ultimately won that case, but they were saying it was too late to go back and do things again. So all aspects of the system that's controlled by party, which is why, again, I have no problem with open primaries, because the judges are elected and they were controlled by the party. So there was something that the judge did that I won't even go into that, but all of it's like,
I actually made the argument that the petitions for governor should have been redone because they were based on congressional districts that were thrown out, right? You had to get signatures from half of the state's congressional districts.
Absolutely.
Districts were not valid districts. They were deemed unconstitutional by a judge. So wouldn't that invalidate all the petitions and necessitate a new petitioning period for governor?
Absolutely. We brought that argument in court. And again, the trial courts, they're, essentially they're party folks. And, we tried to kind of court shop a little bit to give ourselves a chance where it wasn't in front of a Democratic judge. But again, once the party speaks, it's hard for a judge. Again, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt because I've worked in the court system, but the process is so heavily controlled by party leaders that if you kind of ruffle feathers, you could essentially be putting yourself on a blacklist and your career could end up stalling out of nowhere. But, this just reinvigorated folks like myself and a lot of folks throughout the state that are really pushing for real change to happen on all levels and redoing parts of the system that allow for this type of control and manipulation of the system to block out just new voices. I knew Mike and Jay when I was running, this was a long shot. The way I described it was, I'm taking a shot at a basketball hoop from the other side of the court, turned around, with the lights totally off and the hoop moving side to side. That was my chances of winning governor. But we understood what those chances were. But the process and the system should at least allow everyone to take a shot, even if it's a long shot, even if it's something that we know it's not about winning, because there's an important message. There's something important that the people need to see and be able to believe in. And so I was a bit angry that the New Yorkers were robbed of that opportunity to be able to, to cast a vote for something new. And the chairman of the party knew what he was doing, because we were gaining some serious momentum enough to really make an upset. Who knows? But definitely enough momentum to make a very strong impact on a race where, typically speaking, you still have those regular candidates that are all basically saying the same thing.
Absolutely. And, even a long shot or not, like you said, you should have the opportunity. People should have the opportunity and should be able to hear what you have to say. That's just part of having this participatory government that we have. And you never know. I mean, no one would have thought AOC was going to win the election that she won. Obama should not have won that first election. Hillary was in every position to have that first. So, you can. And even if you don't make it to the final win, along the way, you could have exposed some weaknesses that the current politicians, have left open, and some of this reminds me of the 2012 campaign, Mike, with the congressional run that you did and that we worked on, where, we did win in some areas, but what that did was the congressman had to recognize that those areas were weak and had to provide resources for those people after the election was over.
Listen, he opened up an office at Auburn by the Sea after he lost the Rockaway.
That?
That was
Yes.
not coincidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And you look at, and again, I was the only candidate that actually announced running against Andrew Cuomo. And again, not that I had any specific problem with Andrew Cuomo, but a lot of the folks that ended up running, had Cuomo still been in the race, none of them would have been challenging him. Because one of the things that we saw with the previous two gubernatorial primaries, you saw Zephyr Teachout move the governor a little bit more to the left, where, he wasn't supporting things like in raising minimum wage, but that was a big talking point for campaigns. And so he moved a little bit to the left. We saw with Cynthia Nixon. Again, I worked in the legislature right there with you, Mike, where we saw almost an empowerment of the Independent Democratic Conference, whatever that was, basically empowering Republicans and stifling the agenda of Democrats. But all of a sudden, Cynthia Nixon comes and she's calling him out on that. And so all of a sudden he moves and Jeff Klein and the boys, they dissolve the Independent Democratic Conference. And so those candidacies, while absolutely recognized as long shots, we all knew that Andrew Cuomo was going to win those. It still moved the conversation. It still shifted what was a very, very heavily kind of Republican-esque type of governor leadership. It moved it to the left, move it closer to the people, move it closer to a more realistic perspective of what the needs of the general public are. And so that was one of the goals that we had. Even if we don't win, the idea is to introduce a couple of things that may shift the ultimate representative in a direction that better reflects the people.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's
it's like, absolutely. And it's like hip hop, man. It's just like hip hop. Politicians need to be on notice. You can be challenged at any time.
That's right.
You gotta grab your mic and be ready to defend at any moment.
Just do me a favor. Next time, don't mail your petitions. Call me. I'll drive them to Albany for you.
That's right. Thanks, Mike. Don't worry. I'm a great tipper, I've heard, man. So you get a nice tip out of that.
There you go.
And it's I do have to applaud you for that. It's an amazing undertaking. It's a big undertaking to do a governor's race, because you've got a state to cover. Yes. It's not necessarily, a few districts in your area, neighborhoods that's within driving distance, within a few minutes. You've got a whole state to cover. And New York is not a small state. It's a pretty wide area.
Yeah, the amount of miles I got on my car now, Jay, man, it was like brand spanking new, and then now it's got all these hard miles going up, and a lot of this took place in the dead of winter. So we drove through snowstorms in Rochester, we drove through snowstorms in Canton, New York, but we were everywhere, and everywhere we went, folks were motivated and they were excited. They're like, wow, you're running for governor. They felt like, man, this is something that I can touch, I can reach. This is a person, as you said before, that we can relate to. But it was lots of fun. And, all of the evil and terribleness of the Democratic Party aside, again, I might even be considering my registration, but all of that aside, it was an amazing experience where we met amazing people. We built a network that no one even thought that we can build across the state. And they're already like, get up. They're like, man, get this thing ready to go 4 years from now. Or if a special election happens because the governor or lieutenant governor ends up having to resign, we're ready to go. But, it's one of those things where, there was still a lot of good that came out of it. And for me, it was an eye-opening experience because I knew politics was terrible. I knew it was dirty, having worked in it. But to know the extent that the party is willing to go to silence voices, that's something that was new to me. I didn't see that one coming. But at the same time, now we retool, we get stronger, we get better. And maybe we may start local, so some of these local folk may need to watch out, man. But you never know. We got it once you get bit by the bug. Because I never in a million years really thought I'd be, running for something. Folks have always told me, "Hey, Paul, maybe you should run for something." But hey, once you get bit by the bug, Jay, I don't know, man. We may, we may be calling on some folks from Japan, to come on out here to help out, man. But
I think it's a good thing. And what you ultimately do is you're able to get out there and touch people. I think a lot of times in these bigger campaigns and these people who are seasoned and they have this big war chest of money, they use money in place of personal contact, right? So, you don't have that money. So you go to the doors, you talk to the people. And I think there's a valuable experience there because you get to hear firsthand what their experiences are, and they get to be heard. They get to feel being heard. And I think that makes a really big difference.
Right. And on that subject, Paul, we call this show Nuance because we think that so much of the nuance is lost in today's conversation. We believe that there's really a lot of common ground amongst all people, but just the way we talk about things, the messaging, the discourse, it kind of keeps us separated. But you got to campaign throughout the state. So what would you say would be the one thing, let's say the biggest issue that you heard from people across the political spectrum and across different regions of the state? What is the one issue that most people were concerned about in your campaign?
Yeah, the one issue was the complete erosion of the middle class. And that's one of the things that you heard because, back in the 90s, the campaign manager, James Carville, for Bill Clinton's campaign said it was the economy, stupid. And although issues of crime have risen to the top, folks' pockets are being hurt all throughout the state. And Marcus Aurelius, who, one of the main protagonists from the Gladiator movie, the real Marcus Aurelius said that poverty is the mother of crime. And so we're seeing crime go up because folks are poor. Folks are hurting economically. You're seeing people committing robberies. You're seeing people holding up bodegas. You see people stealing because they just do not have. So when we see all throughout the state, whether it was in the, western portions of the state, the North Tier, central New York, folks were hurting in their pockets and they felt like government was contributing to the erosion of the economic health of the middle class. And that was a phrase that we coined because we often talk about physical health where, we got to get in the gym, get those biceps up and those triceps up and, make sure we're keeping our diet properly. And then we've also heard about mental health, making sure that we're mentally stable and mentally fit and making sure that the issues that stem from that are curbed. But we don't really talk about the economic health of the residents of the state of New York, meaning, are you financially stable to a place where it doesn't have a psychological impact, a stress level impact. We know that the statistics have finances is like the number 2 cause of divorce all throughout the country. And so we heard that everywhere, that the middle class was hurting, the middle class was struggling, rents were getting high. Again, they're super high in New York, so that was without saying. But other places throughout the state, we're seeing just the rents and just the affordability of buying a home is becoming further and further out of the reach of people in regular situations. People that grew up in neighborhoods can no longer even afford to buy a home in the neighborhood that they grew up in. And so that was a constant criticism that we heard all throughout the state. And that was something that was a primary component of what we were talking about here. And so I had a feeling that that was the case before we even traveled the state, but we got that 100% confirmation.
Well, Paul, I commend you for what you have done and what you are doing. Keep at it. This is a marathon, not a sprint, as I'm sure you've heard, and hearing more from you in the future. We are almost out of time here, but I did want to talk about this one thing before we signed off, and that is in local news. The Rockaway Beach today was closed after multiple shark sightings. And in fact, on Beach 67th Street, a surfer was in the ocean and said that a shark bumped into his surfboard. And so it's a concern. They're saying that they'll reopen the beaches once it's safe to do so. The governor is talking about more patrols on the sharks with drones and helicopters and boats to try to track their movements. But it's become an issue. In fact, we didn't really have a poll question this week, but maybe that's a question we could put out there about if people are concerned about shark attacks now when they go into the water. Does it stop them from getting into the water?
Yeah, no, it's a real issue. And for those that are still of the mind that climate change is not a real thing, we should be getting more evidence every single day that climate change is real. And unless we as people start looking at ways that we can shift our behavior and try to, stem some of the tides that we've already set in motion to be able to, kind of counteract some of the climate change that we've seen, we're going to see more and more things like this. I know you were there during Superstorm Sandy, where again, a lot of these storms were once in 100-year storms, but yet we were getting hit in Southeast Queens, seemingly once every couple of years, and them in rising, devastating, quantities. We got hit by Hurricane Ida just over this last hurricane season. That was devastating. I went and saw some of the families that experienced loss. But, the sharks and folks and storms, these are all byproducts of man-made activities that are creating different weather patterns. So sharks are just responding to, where the climate change is taking them. And so if we're not careful, we're going to have to be closing all the beaches here. We're going to be going to Coney Island or seeing stuff happen, in Jones Beach and seeing stuff happening in Manhattan Beach. Pretty soon, we've got Jamaica Bay we got to be careful about now. So all of these different things are going to end up being byproducts if we don't start curbing some of our behavior and really taking account that the things that we're going to be doing can have long-term effects on our environment.
Or there were some gnarly waves, and that shark was just trying to catch some waves.
Catch the waves, man.
And the surfer got in his way. The surfer was trying to jack his wave, and he's like, "No, bro, this is mine." That's
right, man. I was just trying to give you a high five, man, on the wave. So I want to try to bite you.
Do you have experience with sharks? I mean, Jay used to live in Hawaii growing up. Is that something? Was there a lot of concern for shark attacks in Hawaii?
I don't recall them, and as much time as I spent on the waves, I never saw any sharks.
Wait, Jay, where haven't you lived, Jay, man? Just in this conversation about Japan, Florida, Hawaii,
California, New York. I've lived in every major region in the country.
If not the world, Jay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I hadn't seen it. I'm sure, definitely there had been some that had taken place. I had seen people, too many people on the waves, and people tend to kind of bump into each other or something, you kind of have to deal with that. But I didn't see a lot in Hawaii. They happen, but it's a scary thing. You don't want to be out there because you're out in their domain at that point.
That's right.
So,
I mean, in all full transparency, Jaws was one of my favorite movie classics for the record. So I don't know if that has anything to do with that, but full disclosure, I love the Jaws series.
full disclosure, I have not seen it.
Oh, bet Jay.
There are a lot of classic movies I have not seen. Godfather, Heat, Jaws.
Oh, no. Jay, what's happening here?
Yeah. So.
All right, so let me make an attempt at this poll question here. Here we go. In light of the Rockaway Beach closure due to shark sightings, are you personally concerned about getting into the water because of the presence of sharks? See what people think.
Yeah, I all the time I lived in New York, I did not go in the water at the beach. I can't do it. New York has been a port for a couple hundred years. The water is just not clean enough for me to get in. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I won't go into the beach in New York. I won't do it.
Wow.
I can't do it.
We're actually past our time here, which is always a good thing. Time flies when we have a good conversation. But a couple of weeks ago, we had Adam Clayton Powell on, and he was saying the bottom line is, and then he cut out right as he was saying that, and he left us hanging. So we now leave it to you to tell us, Paul, what is the bottom line?
The bottom line is we've got to be able to do things differently. If we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. And so the message that I always leave with folks is, just radically take a time to do something different, do something new, do something you've never done before. We're radically approaching a very critical time in our state's history, in our country's history, and our world's history. And it's going to take courageous movement. This wasn't easy for me to run for governor, and it was absolutely me coming way outside of my comfort zone. But hey, I wanted to see something different, and so I feel it was time to do something different. So I challenge everyone, whether it's in your own smallest circles, whether it's in a big circle, if you want to see something done differently, we got to do differently, and that's the bottom line.
I love it.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And of course, we are on YouTube, so subscribe. It's Nuance with Mike Scala and Jay Carter. We're also available anywhere podcasts can be found, Apple, Spotify, and so forth.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jay. Great job, guys.
Thanks
All right.
for joining us.
Next time. Bye-bye.